Well, hi.
Well, hi.
How's everybody doing?
Howdy.
Hello.
Okay, so that's good. So we had a little panicky moment there. Like it seemed like it was just Ritu and I that were able to, talk.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah, and then
we can carry a show, but
clearly.
Have you ever done that before?
Never.
You don't have any experience with that, huh?
I've seen it a couple times. We've got pretty much the entire country covered here. We've got myself out here in Oregon. Well, same with Ritu. Then we'll split it with Jarvis, put him sort of in the middle. Then we got our good friend, Dr. Peter Antevy, bringing up the East Coast.
It's getting late here.
It's almost really tomorrow, buddy.
I'm only in my third
drink. We got all the zones of time.
We pretty much got them all.
Cheers,
well, it's
guys.
good to see everybody. Let's see what's shaking here. We got a bunch of people on Facebook watching. Apparently, if you've found yourself here and you're thinking the damn YouTube channel isn't working, I have no idea why. It's not working. But the good news is we have live.flightbridgeed.com that's working. We got that figured out. So anyway, this is where you want to be anyway, because we can talk and we can chat and we can do all that stuff. So
absolutely where the cool kids are.
Yeah, it's definitely where the cool kids are at.
Damn straight.
Well, it's Wednesday, my dudes.
It is.
It's a day ending in Y. Do you know what that means?
A day in the line.
We are drinking.
Cheers.
Well, we're not calling it happy hour for nothing.
Damn
so,
straight.
As usual, we'll go around the horn. I'll start first because that's what I like to do.
Absolutely.
Tonight, I've decided to go with the 2011 Brook Laddie, and it's not spelled Brook Laddie. That's how you say it. It's way more complicated than that. It's B-R-U. Well, let's see. I texted it earlier.
Well, it's also Scottish, so you have to scream and cuss and
it's super weird. It's spelled. Hold on a sec. Would you?
Brook Laddie, right? Like that.
It's BRUICHLADDICH.
You lost me at B.
I know it's too much, but anyway, it's delicious. It's the only Scotch I've ever had because I'm not really a Scotch guy. But
we got to fix that, man.
Yeah,
gotta fix that.
So anyway, let's jump over to Pete. What do you got over there, Peter?
Well, this is actually an old fashioned. And as many of you know, anything that has the word old in it, This Old House is my favorite show.
Yeah. And that was, and just, so,
and you made fun of me for that. Remember that?
No, listen,
among other things,
listen, This Old House. So for those of you we're going back to what, 2015, maybe 16,
probably 30.
Yeah. It was a long time ago when you were one of the early guests on Second Shift back when it was Bauer.
Yes.
And we had our top 5 favorite TV shows.
That's correct.
That was like the second episode.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think we did that with you too, Ritu. You too, Ritu. Wow, that was.
We did not do top 5
late
TV shows.
We didn't do top 5 TV. I know we did Christmas shows.
We did Christmas movies because what you're going to do when you have a Hindu on is asking about Christmas movies.
Yeah. In retrospect, that probably wasn't a great move.
I think it was actually my idea. So.
It might have been. A guy that doesn't celebrate Christmas.
Correct.
But anyway, back to top 5 shows just real quick before we move on. We had a very exciting
Mikey trying desperately to hold this together.
No, listen. We had a great list going. I don't remember what it was, but Peter had some great shows. And then we get to number 1, and I'm thinking, what could it be? And he breaks out with This Old House as his number 1 favorite show of all time.
I still watch it.
Peter, I thought 60 Minutes was your favorite show.
Yeah, this week, baby.
Hey, let me tell you what. I think 60 Minutes was neck and neck. And then when I got on 60 Minutes, it became my favorite show. But back then, This Old House was top 1.
Yeah.
I see.
All right.
That was a flex. Sorry.
Ritu, what's in your class?
Well, I'm sporting the Blazer tumbler.
Okay.
Trail Blazers. And I'm going with a local.
Are they a college team?
Yeah, play me.
Wow.
Going with a local Burnside distillery. here on the east side of the Portland, and their rye. I've liked the rye recently. I believe I had some rye the other day with you.
You did have some rye the other day.
And more rye.
You hit that glorious shot on hole 7.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, Jarvis.
Well, first off, I don't know if you can see it. I got my Aggie glass, and I decided I'm doing a little bourbon. I decided to go out east to New York. I'm doing some, at least I think it's New York, larceny. John E. Fitzgerald larceny. Apparently is named for a federal agent who was the only one who had the keys to where this is right after Prohibition, and had the keys to where all the they're not kegs, barrels of whiskey are, and he would go in at night and steal all the good barrels and leave everything else to sell. So they decided to name this after him and his larcenous behavior.
Wow.
And it's an okay bourbon. It's not bad.
He's rewarding that terrible behavior of his.
Isn't it though? Yeah. Yep. I mean, it's not a Garrison Brothers Texas whiskey or anything.
Yeah, I don't know much about that, but
I keep meaning to order some so I can raise my handful glass.
Absolutely. It's a good here. In case you haven't seen it.
Now Jarvis is having the squirrel moment.
It takes much to squirrel me. Yep. So you see the nice Texas star there?
Yeah.
So it is a damn fine whiskey. It's they kind of like it though, so definitely not a daily drinker.
So I was told in the comments, Bill Toon says Florida's not the East Coast.
It's another country in some parts.
Yeah. Hey, you guys are doing really great with COVID down there, by the way.
Oh yeah, great. Lovely.
I thought Florida
we're bathing in COVID.
I thought that was the retirement community for Toon's version of the East Coast.
Could be.
I also understand there are more New York license plates in Florida than there are in New York.
Although I tell you, I was just in New York. I took my family and we escaped Florida for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, those people are doing it right. Here, no one gives a shit.
Oh, about COVID?
Everything's open. The schools are back. The restaurants, the bars. It's not even happening here.
Well, speaking of Texan, our governor told us that this was all, it's fake news. It's imaginary. And it's our patriotic duty to go out and take one for the team and hit the bars.
Really? Are they saying the same thing in El Paso, Jeff, where they're opening up field hospitals?
I might or might not have spoken to somebody out at one of those today. Hypothetical. I mean, I'm sure it's just fake news that those hospitals are there. Yeah. No, it's, you can only deny reality for so long. It doesn't work much after that.
Well, I guess that brings us straight into our first topic, which if you haven't figured out by now, we're 9 minutes in, and we sort of have a loose agenda. But
that's a euphemism, my friend.
Yeah,
they ain't got shit for an agenda.
No, that's not true at all. We absolutely do. Listen, when we first decided we were going to get together, we did not have an agenda. And I would say up to 2 hours ago, we really didn't have an agenda, but we worked it out in like 6 minutes. Am I lying? No.
No.
Let's say 2 hours ago.
The only agenda is that we would be drinking and that everyone who's watching would be drinking. So hopefully all the people watching have a drink in their hands.
Our friends. So if you are in the comments there and you're joining us for happy hour, just type in there what you got in your glass. Maybe it's Diet Coke or something. Whatever. That's cool. Whatever.
Yep.
We sort of just went into the first topic, which is always a little update on the situation. So I don't know that we need to spend hours on it, but Ritu, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Oregon?
Well, I mean, Oregon, same thing that's happening kind of most of the country right now. I mean, Oregon is seeing an increase in numbers just like everybody else. We've always been on the lower end, and we continue to be. But we had our highest number of cases yesterday, I think. So it's just the numbers are going up, and in terms of where we are in our EMS and emergency healthcare system, it feels, in terms of the amount of divert and what we call active zone management, but they're kind of, everybody's on divert, so nobody's on divert. So you kind of shuttle, round robin is what the other thing we call it. We round robin our hospitals. We're doing that every day now for multiple hours a day. It's not just COVID. It doesn't feel like the midst of a heavy flu season yet in terms of the number of respiratory cases I'm seeing, but it's definitely going up. And then the hospitals are just full in general because it just fills up.
Yeah.
It starts to fill up usually in November. So this is a little bit early.
Yeah. So sort of all joking aside, we know El Paso is a bit of a mess right now and they're drowning and dying out there. What are things like in your neck of the woods there, Dr. Jarvis?
Well, so just for all you non-Texans out there, I mean, I know El Paso is part of the great state of Texas, but it's 1,000 miles from Beaumont at the far eastern edge to El Paso at the far western edge. It's actually closer, I think, for me to get to Peter than it is for me to get to El Paso. So it's a different time zone. It's a long, long way away. So I worked a shift in the ER today, and it is definitely not where we were in June or July. I admitted one hypoxic COVID patient, which is the first one I've admitted in maybe a month. So it's starting to pick up, but we're kind of like Ritu. It's definitely not even close to where, say, a bad flu season is. But man, the trends are, we peaked out at about 110, 115 cases a day, new cases a day in Williamson County back in June, July. We had dropped down to around 10, and we're up to the 50s, 60s again, just over the last couple of weeks. Yeah. So it's bumping up, but we're just not quite there yet.
Yeah. We're in the 500s per day in all of Oregon.
Yeah.
So we've done really well.
Yeah.
Well,
I think we're around 1,500 maybe. That's not a number I really follow all that often.
1,500 total in Williamson County?
No. Texas.
Oh, got you.
I think. I really haven't looked at that number in a while.
That's it? Only 1,500? Not too bad.
I know you guys can pump that out in like 2 hours, right? Down there?
Damn it, I'm going to have to excuse me while I put my readers on.
Jarvis is putting his readers on. Give us the situation there in your neck of the woods, Peter.
Yeah, so we had 4,000 cases yesterday.
Competition.
Our infection rate, which was hovering in the 4% range, 4-point-something%, now is over 5. But here's the interesting part. When you look at the Hopkins percentage of Florida, it's double of what Florida, the state of Florida, represents as their infection rate, which is, so, Hopkins will say it's about 11-12%, and Florida will say about 5 or 6%. And so the theory is that Florida states that they only represent the people who've been detected COVID positive once, whereas Hopkins apparently will, capture everybody who's been positive, even if you go back and repeat the test. Either way, the way I know things are getting worse here, not only because our hospitals are filling back up, but, I do a lot of testing here because I have 2,000 paramedics to be responsible for. Yeah. And when the phone calls start ringing and I get calls from my chiefs that we have another cluster. So this past week, the phones have been ringing. And we've actually been doing a pretty big COVID testing study here over the last couple of months. And the last couple of weeks we've seen an obvious increase. So my prediction, and I hate to say it, is that after Thanksgiving, I think they're probably going to tell the kids to stay home from school because, Florida is wide open right now. We're completely open as if nothing was happening. And you've seen the numbers just start to do this. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I believe your governor said that it was over, right?
He did. And just today they said that in January, they're thinking about mandating everybody go back to in-person school. That's how blind they are to what's actually coming. So there you go, Florida for you.
Yeah, I mean, I have people who tell me that on November 4th, it's all going to be gone.
Right, because it's all.
So you can go back to school on November 4th because
yes,
cases will be 0 that day.
Thank God for that. Yeah.
Well, we managed to go 15 minutes before our first overly obvious political.
Oh no!
Today
I'm sorry, I didn't realize
we do our endorsements. Weren't we going to do our political endorsements today? Was that right?
Oh no!
Are you crazy, man? Or wait,
stay away,
man. Would you shut up? There's my contribution to that. Jeff, did you find your numbers there that you were looking for?
No. So honestly, we've had some data reporting issues that I try not to go, put my conspiracy theory hat on, but we've had some data reporting issues. So honestly, I've sort of quit looking. But I'm gonna find it.
Yeah. We've had some really good discussion in the comments already. So this one, I'll just throw this one to you, Dr. Antevy. But people are wondering, where are the tests at? The false positives and the false negatives. How good are they? Are they getting any better?
So I think the PCRs are oversensitive, meaning that we've had some of our folks who have tested 52 days out positive PCR. That's a problem, and that's why the CDC moved their guidance to after 10 days, don't even worry about testing again, which I kind of partially believe.
Pete, though, that's not, I don't think you could really call that a false positive because it's testing viral particles, and the viral particles are there. It's just an interpretation issue.
No, right. But if the person is not infectious after day 10 and I'm keeping them out of work and we're calling those people positive, that's a problem, right? So, I mean, as far as false positives in general, I think I'm worried more about the false negatives. I don't think there's too many false positives. I mean, I'm doing a big antigen study now, and there aren't that many false positives, but there's a lot of false negatives, right? So a lot of people who have been testing negative on the antigen test who actually have the disease. And as you know, the PCRs aren't that good either. I think that the issue for me is that the PCRs are too sensitive, number one. It's taking way too long for us to get answers. That's number two. And by the time people get their result, they've infected many other people. And I don't know about you guys in Oregon or in Texas, but our contact tracing and that whole process is a disaster. So it's kind of non-existent. People aren't even getting phone calls. Yeah. Yep. And so with no masks, no contact tracing, shitty testing, and all the schools and all the businesses and bars open, you know where we're headed, right? We're heading right towards a cliff. So,
yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, from what I can tell, I get updates from the county every day, and at least in the county that we're in, it seemed like we have some metrics that we're supposed to be meeting, some benchmark stuff as far as contact tracing. And actually, this week it seems like they're doing pretty good usually, but this week, I think they have to have tracing. Was it within 24 hours over the last 7 days or something like that? We're like 98%. So that's actually pretty good for us.
Yeah. I mean, they're hiring contact tracers literally every single day. Yeah. The problem we're having is that there's still a sizable chunk of cases that are not traceable, that are community spread. We are seeing those ones that are traceable are all traceable to family gatherings suddenly. Yeah. So that's going to get way worse Saturday and then November. But yeah, I mean, we're not in any way, shape, or form moving in the right direction in this. And a lot of people, I've seen people like, oh, well, 99% of everybody who gets this survives. Sure, but if 150 million people get this,
yeah,
then and 1% of them dies, that's 1.5 million people dead, and that's the math, and the best way to survive COVID is to not get it, right?
That's my plan.
That's my plan too.
You know, and it's just unfortunate, and it's you know, I think Mike, we said this early on, like when we did really well in Oregon, like in March, you know, like stuff was looking bad. We were ahead of you guys. I remember having some conversations with Jeff, tap back and forth. He's like, what's going on there? Because, you know, and then we shut everything down, and 2 weeks later, you know, but then after we kind of opened everything up, I'm like, yeah, we kind of shot the wad. There's no going back, and that's kind of what it feels like.
So, you know, as much as I want to mock folks for saying, open it up, you got to open it up. You can't, I don't blame them. I mean, at some point there is a balance, and, you know, my mom, and hopefully mom is watching. If you are, hi mom, love you. Hi,
Mr. Jarvis.
Say hi to mom.
Hi, Mom.
Hi.
You know, it's driving her crazy staying inside like that. So there's a cost to it. I think a rampant spread of the virus is probably worse. And what would be nice is if we actually came up with a way to mitigate the risk while also mitigating the risk of staying inside. But I guess you'd have to sort of admit that it's a problem in order to
I mean,
first.
If you look at the places that have been successful, I mean, look at New Zealand. You know, they have concerts and sporting events and restaurants, because when they hit community spread, they shut everything down for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and then boom.
Wasn't it like 120 days? Oh wait, no, that was Melbourne. Sorry, I was watching.
Oh yeah.
I was watching, I'm sorry, not New Zealand. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ritu.
Yeah, no, Melbourne. So interestingly, because we have a lot of folks that we follow on Twitter from Australia.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that had to do with sort of late recognition. So, you know, once you're kind of out of control, it just takes that much longer to get back in control.
Yeah.
But the whole point is to get to a number where you can do reasonable contact tracing, to shut it down when it finally happens. And
but Ritu, we have friends in Shanghai. And when there's a positive, they come to your house, they take you away, they put you in a hotel, they put tape on the door to make sure you didn't leave the door that night. I mean, they are like maniacal. There's no way in the world that it could be done here. People here want their freedom. People want to go outside.
To wear a mask.
Correct.
You know,
there's number two.
That's not a political statement.
All right, so
we have one weapon in this battle right now, and I mean, you just
hydroxychloroquine.
Oh, that's you. You got that one.
Okay.
That is funny. My one patient came in today with hydroxychloroquine. Of course, she had Sjogren's, so there's another reason for it. Yeah, I'm trying to. My masks are all.
Well, it sort of brings us, there's some really good discussions still going on in the comments. So thank you guys for participating, jumping in, putting stuff in there. That is awesome. And so this will almost carry us into our next topic, sort of ish. And that is, what are you seeing? Are you seeing an increase in cardiac arrest in your system this year? And, you know, I think it was Sean in here, who's apparently just north of me, which I didn't realize. Thank you for that, brother. Up in Southwest Washington, they're seeing upwards of 45% increase in the amount of cardiac arrest than over last year. What are you seeing in Florida? Are you seeing anything like that, Dr. Antevy?
Yeah, not only are we seeing an increase in cardiac arrest, but my phone is nonstop ringing because obviously there's a lot of patients trying to get refusals. We have patients who have clear STEMIs, CHF, their stats are 70%, people who are stroking out. And in Florida, we have the incapacitated persons law, where we're allowed to basically kidnap you, essentially, you know, legally.
Yeah.
And obviously, it never really comes to that because I have to get on the phone with them. I call the family members, but I have never been on the phone so much with my folks in the field. And now, so we've implemented the ability for me to get on video with people. People just don't want to go to the hospital, man. Let me tell you. So it's real. And we are seeing increased cardiac arrest, and we're seeing increased all the other badness, especially in the last couple of months. So I'm curious to see what you guys are seeing out there as well.
Yeah. Dr. Jarvis?
So I don't have oddly enough, so I'm a numbers nerd. I haven't looked at the numbers on this. Anecdotally, I can tell you our cardiac arrests are going up a little bit. Total numbers aren't that much. Initially, they did go up probably 10, 15%. The outcomes, on the other hand, our outcomes are just going to be atrocious this year.
Yeah, I don't even want to look at that.
We're just seeing asystole.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad. By the way, I finally found the damn website. So I would 1,500. I don't know where I came up with that. That would be glorious if it was 5,100 new cases.
There you go. You beat me, son of a gun.
105 deaths, which is a shame. I wish we weren't doing high on that. 17,000, a little over 17,000 total deaths, and 879,000 total cases in Texas. So my guess is we're going to break 1 million probably mid-November. Scary.
Wow.
And sad.
Ritu, have you been checking out our numbers? Oh, Nick Adams brings up a good point.
So we I looked at I looked at some of our Clackamas County numbers probably 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah.
I did look at our Washington County numbers about a couple weeks ago, and the numbers don't really look like they've gone up that much. But our survival rate has taken a hit.
Yeah.
And it's not just overall survival rate. I get what Jeff's saying, a lot of asystole, but that wouldn't impact your Utstein survival.
That's correct.
Utstein survival is down too.
Yeah, ours is too.
So it's not just it's not just that we're seeing a tougher case mix. It's also because it's also the VFs are down. Now, if somebody's in VF and they don't get bystander CPR, they're less likely to survive. And
that's what Nick was bringing up. Nick Adams, people are not engaging in bystander CPR like they were before.
What's interesting is in Washington County, the bystander CPR number hasn't changed.
Wow.
So Utstein's down, overall survival's down, but bystander CPR number is not.
Interesting.
So I don't know what that means. And then I think Bill Toon asked if we're CARES. Both the counties that Mike and I work with are CARES. Jeff, you're in CARES, right?
Yeah, but my second agency, my smaller agency, just went online. I'm very proud of them.
Peter, you're a CARES guy, right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
So Remley just chimed in. Hi, Remley.
Remley, what's up, Remley?
She said EMS calls for patients with chest pain have gone down, refusals have gone up, and the rate of refusals varies by patient, race/ethnicity. Important to consider communication and the affective domain more than ever. And just by the way, she is presenting the abstract on November 20th at the International Scientific Symposium.
Yeah, listen, we can't listen to what she says. I'll tell you what, Remley, come back to us when you have a decent size N. I mean, you're at like what, 20 million?
Yeah, whatever. We should have had Remley come on. Next time.
We do.
We've had Remley on.
Oh, I know. It was just more regularly. She's just great.
We have to pay her though. I have to go hand deliver the tacos.
Well,
listen, Mike. There's no white guy. There's 3 white guys and a brown guy. You still need a woman on here.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's true.
I should send her a link. She could probably jump on right now if she wanted to. But let's jump into one of our actual topics that we were going to talk about. I mean, so far we're 100% of covering topics. We already talked about COVID, and we could talk for hours. But the next one was, if you haven't been paying attention out there, the AHA did their usual updates that like I've never seen so much anticipation. Like leading up to this for like 4 days, people were geeked out. They were like, man, what's it going to be? What's it going to be? Like they were looking for, like, is the ultrasound going to be in there? Is it mechanical CPR? Like, what's the epi? What's the airway? The doo-doo, whatever. Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
As usual. It was sort of lame. And in fact, in some places, and that's why we wanted to bring that handsome Florida devil in here.
Our Italian friend.
Yeah.
That's right.
So for those of you that are watching that maybe have not heard of or don't know Dr. Peter Antevy,
is that possible?
Yeah.
Everybody knows Peter.
It is it's possible. It's
I think it's only the 7 people listening today. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, we've got 50 on right now. Thank you.
We do.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
That's awesome.
We'd have
But anyway,
60 if Peter wasn't here, but
that's true. It's almost tomorrow where he's at, remember? So let's take it easy.
I will point out only one of us has actually been on 60 Minutes. So
there you go.
That's true. That's true. Well, so,
I'll take it to my grave.
Peter, did you call up your buddy Leslie Stahl and say, did you not take a bath or something? I mean, what was the issue?
I did text the producer who interviewed, who was, yes, I texted her, and they were just appalled, man. They couldn't believe that what happened. But it was actually beneficial for them. The ratings were higher than ever before. So.
That they were. I believe, Mike, if you're counting, that was 4.
Okay, we're up to 4.
I did. What exactly is going to be our political endorsements? Can you guess?
I'm an independent, by the way, just so you know. Okay, go ahead.
I can promise you there will be a text chain on November 3rd evening.
For those of you that are trying to figure out what's happening in this live broadcast, it's out of control already.
What were the odds of that?
100%. That's okay. These are our friends. It's totally fine. Like, I'm gonna sleep fine tonight. I'm not worried about it. This is what friends do.
Trust me, Amber Hossack, who's listening in Oregon, is not going to mind this conversation.
No, not at all. That's a nice little shout out. We got a lot of friends on. Thank you guys for joining in and watching us. But we want to get to the AHA updates.
Yes,
since I pretty much know that Ritu didn't read anything, I should have him go first. No, I'm just kidding.
Ritu did more.
No.
He definitely did more homework than I did.
I know. No, that's good. That's why we got Peter on here. We're going to have him lead the discussion. And then I know that between the rest of the 3 of us, we read a couple of pages, and we can probably chime in to some of the stuff. But what are your thoughts, Peter? Is this what we were waiting for? Are they good? Are they bad? Have we backtracked? What's going on?
Let me tell you, Mike, many people know that I'm a low anxiety kind of guy. Nothing bothers me, right? I have lost some sleep on this, man. So there were 2 main recommendations. One was a change in the recommendation, and one was a non-change, both of which I think were, kind of pretty flagrant, if you will. First, the recommendation to change from 10 breaths a minute over to 20 to 30 breaths per minute. So hear what I'm saying. They want to double to triple ventilations in a cardiac arrest patient. And so that was made, that decision was made based on one study, a single paper, which was part of this kind of like collaborative network of hospitals around the country. And they got 47 patients in there. 74% of those patients had an initial presenting rhythm of bradycardia with poor perfusion. 60% of the patients had congenital heart disease. All of them had an advanced airway. Only 8 had asystole. And by the way, all asystolic patients died. And the purpose of that study was to see whether or not the ICU physicians could follow the guidelines. Not one of them got to 110 compression rate. Not one of them hit the ventilation rate of 10 breaths per minute. And so, but they found kind of secondarily that, oh, by the way, the folks who got, who got bad more quickly had a higher ROSC rate and higher neurointact survival rate. And so they basically are, maybe not understanding the pathophysiology of the fact that when you're overventilating people and giving positive pressure, yes, the heart is one thing, but it's the brain. It's the brain that they're not understanding. And when they even in the data, they say that the systolic blood pressure went way down when you hyperventilate somebody. And they are basically looking at the wrong population. Most kids that we treat, I think, all of us on the call would understand that we don't treat congenital heart disease patients mainly who have a Brady rhythm, who have an airway already there. And so there was a, 2 thumbs down on that recommendation is my first comment. And, I'll stop there for the banter here. But I think this is a tremendously, a bad move. And I think that I would be surprised if the rest of the country kind of moved along with this. I would recommend that we really look hard at that one paper with an N of 47 before we decide to make such a drastic change. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to think about that.
Well, I think Benji McCollum's comment is right where I was going to go. Good job, Benji. I mean, we already, we have to use, we've implemented engineering tools to reduce the amount of overventilation using, pressure controlled bags, lights and all those things. We looked at a monitor with some of those tools just the other day, but providers already overventilate. I mean, the last thing we need to do is encourage them to go faster. I mean, that's like, I'm quoting what Benji's comment was, because he hit the nail right on the head.
I think what you could do logistically is just say, just treat the kids, ventilate them at the rate that you're ventilating adults now, and you'll probably hit about 20 a minute. So if you slow it down in half, then you might get there. Yeah, just logistically, I don't think we're going to be able to do that, even if we wanted to, even if we thought it was a good thing. I don't think you're going to get it. I mean, unless you use a ventilator, and I just don't see that happening. Certainly.
The problem is, and I'm going to put my neck out here. Okay, I'm going to probably piss some people off, and that's okay.
Yes.
I've already had 3
Ladies and
drinks,
gentlemen, breaking news. Pay attention. Drop what you're doing.
Okay, the people who wrote that paper with the 47 patients on it are the people who wrote the guidelines. Let's be honest. Okay, shame on them. They have a lock on the guidelines. They've ignored the science for the last 20 years. Keith Lurie, who's I think one of the legends that at least I look up to, he's a huge mentor of mine, proved that in adults, hyperventilation kills. Daniel Spate has proved hyperventilation kills. It has been proven in pig studies that hyperventilation kills. And those pigs are, by the way, 30 kilos, 9-year-old children. Fine. How in the world do you make a decision like this that it will impact thousands of children a year, 20,000 children a year going to cardiac arrest? How can you make a decision like this based on 47 children in an ICU who have congenital heart disease? Shame on them for doing that. And by the way, we are now on a mission. I spoke to Keith tonight about it. We're going to recreate the pig study and look at the pressures in the brain, because if you look at the studies on pigs, when they actually, and even in the studies that are referenced in the AHA, when you look at the cerebral oxygenation, when you hyperventilate the patients, it goes down by 100%. It goes down from 30 to 15% to 15. So let's say 50%. So you cannot look at this data seriously and decide to go to this 20 to 30 breaths per minute. And so, listen, nobody owns me. I'm not worried about speaking my mind. It's all about the patient. People who know me know that. Yeah. And so not one person on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook has given me one good argument why the AHA is correct. And I would love to hear from someone from the AHA to explain their theory on this one. So my rant is over, Mike. Go ahead. Sorry.
So good. Thank you for that.
I'll tell you, it strikes me as really interesting which papers the Heart Association latches onto and decides that they're all in on that. So you said, I'm sorry, the N on that was 45 in a patient's population that's completely different than what we're looking at now.
Not one iota the same. Not one iota.
So it's interesting, and that's what they pick up on, yet there are some other studies that they just sort of miss the point of. It is interesting. I'm not...
Case in point.
Yeah.
Paul Banerjee did a study. They do 6 breaths per minute. They went the other way, and they tripled neurointact survival in out-of-hospital pediatric cardiac arrest. Was that paper referenced in the guidelines? It was not referenced in the guidelines.
Right.
So,
I don't know.
So point number 2, a big miss in PALS. And this is the exact opposite of what I just spoke about. So for symptomatic bradycardia, for years I have thought that giving a cardiac arrest dose of epinephrine was completely wrong. Right? Why would we give epinephrine to a perfusing rhythm? I changed my protocols in 2019 after an amazing study came out with thousands of patients in it by Holmberg in 2019 in resuscitation that basically said giving epinephrine to symptomatic bradycardia is deadly. Okay, that was their conclusion. The AHA referenced that article and said, although there was one article that stated that epinephrine for symptomatic bradycardia is harmful, we have chosen to keep it in. So like it was, I mean, and so my protocols all throughout all my agencies, we use push pressor epi. We've removed cardiac arrest epi for symptomatic bradycardia. But they did the exact opposite. They took a small paper with an N of 47 and they made a drastic change. And now they did exactly the opposite with a big paper with a big N with a good outcome, and they fucked it up. Sorry for my language there. So
that's okay. Thank you.
So just to be clear, Peter, you're not advocating not using epinephrine for symptomatic bradycardia, just not cardiac, or it's the dosing is what you're suggesting?
Correct. Yeah, I think I saw you were suggesting the push dose.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of push dose epi. There's studies out there now that show that push dose epi have better outcomes. And I am now moving to, in my county, intra-arrest epi that is a continuous infusion. So rather than these big, just bolus of 0.01 mg per key that you spike every 3 to 5 minutes, and Wake County's been doing this for, my God, over a decade now. And other places have been too. I think we have the dose of epi wrong.
Yeah.
So I think we have to make modification. I think, Jeff, aren't you doing something in that realm as well?
Yeah, we use, so our approach here, and it's based, by the way, on Paramedic 2, which is the same paper they referenced here to say, just keep doing the same shit we've always been doing. We do, because I do think that there is some evidence that early epinephrine is beneficial. So we do 1 milligram of epinephrine, 1 to 10,000, as soon as you can get it in, preferably through an IV. It has to be an IO humeral head, so above the waist. And after that, if you're in a shockable rhythm, we don't give any epinephrine. And if you're in a non-shockable, we start an infusion.
Beautiful. That's. See, I think everyone listening should do exactly that. I mean,
but why?
Just to be clear,
I understand your argument, Mike. Jeff and I got into this argument, but where's your data to support?
Ritu, what I was going to say here is, just to be clear, that is not based on any data. Here is the my approach to this. I do think that Paramedic 2 was fairly conclusive that what we're doing now is not getting us the outcomes we want. Now, if you want more Ross,
that's not what the Heart Association just said.
Actually, so let's get into that again.
Get that sentence out completely. I'm sorry.
So let's get into that again, because I love the statement. That is the classic statement that a committee wrote. They knew they didn't have the evidence to say epinephrine is good. So what they said is it is associated with more short-term benefits. And by short-term, they mean like 30 days. But the evidence on neurologic outcome is not clear. Now, I'm not sure I agree with the neurologic outcome, because Paramedic 2 is by far, hands down, 8,000 patients. It is the best data that we have to date on the impact of epinephrine. And it's a great study. 1 to 10,000 epi versus placebo in cardiac arrest. And what they found is there was an increase in 30-day survival. There was no difference in then huge increase in ROSC, but I think everybody with a brain already knew that. No difference in neurologic survival at discharge, but here's the thing. If you look at
there was worse neurologic survival.
Well, no, there wasn't. If you look at everybody involved, there was no difference. But here is the thing that I think most patients care about, and that is, if I survive, what is my neurologic function? And that there was, if you look at neurologic devastation, it was
Yeah.
like 30% with epinephrine versus 17%
Yeah.
with placebo. So it was
Yeah, that's what I was referencing.
Yeah.
Jeff, when was the epinephrine given? It was 16 and a half minutes after arrival or 21 and a half minutes after the patient fell over.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the Banerjee study, where they came
Yeah.
down to 5.4 minutes, everything changed. So I think it is the speed.
So maybe
you have to look at that.
You do. So 21 minutes from whatever their number is, 011.
Mhm.
But if you, one of the things that we do in the US is say, well, that doesn't apply to us because we're so much faster. And we're just not. I ran the data with a huge data set, and we were massively faster, like 2 minutes. The interquartile range is definitely inclusive of it. So we're not. But I think ultimately what we figure out is we've done more epinephrine, like high dose epi, and what we found is, yep, absolutely more ROSC, no difference in neurological outcome. Now we're looking at this and we're saying that epinephrine is saving the heart at the expense of the brain, which is not what we want to do. And here's the fascinating thing that I love about this paper. They actually did a Bayesian analysis, and which gives you a percent chance that that you're going to get this type of event.
But this is not a Lighthouse episode.
Well, it should be. Everything should be. So the fascinating thing here is that in order to get the study approved, they actually had to ask people, survey the population, and say, what do you value? And what do you think is the minimal important clinical difference in neurologic survival? And they said, well, I'd want to see a 2% difference. If you're going to give me a drug and risk putting me in a coma, I want a 2% increased difference in neurologic outcome when I leave the hospital. So they did a Bayesian analysis based on this, and the chance that you would see a 2% better functional neurologic outcome when you leave the hospital was 0. Not 0.1, mind you, 0. So at best, there was a 30. So based on how positive this study was in their surrogate marker, which is survival at 30 days, a 37% chance you're going to see a 1% improvement. It drops down to a 0.2% chance that you're likely to see a 2% improvement. And that's in an outcome that we don't care about. So that's where I think we really missed the boat with these guidelines. I think we're not looking at what we need to look at. And I think we should have been more clear that the evidence not only is not great, that this is beneficial and the thing that matters, but that there is pretty strong evidence that it's bad at what patients actually care about. So I think we really should have done a better job talking about uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, they give epinephrine like under its, 1 absolutely helpful, 2 probably helpful, 2B maybe helpful, and then to no benefit or harm. They give epi a 1, which I don't think they've ever done that before. And in their statement, again, words matter. Yeah. And if you read their statement very closely, it says that there is data that shows that epinephrine improves ROSC and likelihood of discharge alive from the hospital. That is a true statement.
Yes.
In Paramedic 2.
Yes.
They also refer the Australian study,
Perth.
It did not show a difference in survival, nor did it show a difference in neurologically intact survival. So, it is sort of an interesting play on words. But so what would you, if you were writing these guidelines, so you can't, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to put your infusion in the guidelines because there's no data.
No.
Right? So what would you put in the guideline?
I would say that there is evidence. I think we have to embrace the uncertainty here. Mm-hmm. I think we have to say that the evidence is that epinephrine definitely gets better ROSC and short-term survival. Anything after that is a crapshoot. I think we need to say that there is some decent evidence. It's not strong, but decent evidence that early epinephrine is good. So we should get the first dose of epinephrine in early. And we think that that is probably about the extent of the recommendation. So I think we should get rid of the every 3 to 5 minutes and say there is not enough evidence to support that. There is evidence that we ought to give that first dose early.
Peter, what would you, based on the evidence that you know, what would you be able to write as a guideline versus on what you, because we all believe, I'm on the same page as you guys and what I believe the physiology is, but I think there's not a lot of data around that. So what would you put as the guideline, Peter?
I would say, first of all, what we know, and because I've been in this situation hundreds of times, is that epinephrine kills brains. We know that, okay? And so we now know that if, obviously, a parent will give CPR on scene, and if an EMS system will stay on scene and actually perform on scene like they do for adults.
That's a different topic we're going to get to.
Right. Okay, I'm getting there. This is like the preamble, okay? It's preamble. So what I would say is that epinephrine given early, number one. I would vote for push pressure epi. And again, what I'm writing into protocol. So just so you know that I'm not just saying this just to say it, is that we're moving into, and this is because of the outcomes and the data and paramedic 2, and there's enough evidence out there to show that what we're doing with epi, it shows that we don't know what we're doing with epi, and that if we can do intra-arrest epi at the same dose over the same amount of time, except that it's not a bolus dose of epi. So it's not that we're not giving 0.01 per kilo every 3 to 5 minutes. It's still 0.01 per kilo, but it's going to be like every 5 to 7 minutes, depending on the rate.
Right.
And so it's high quality BLS, making sure we have good recoil, because a lot of people just lean on that chest, making sure we don't overventilate the patient, and follow the Paul Banerjee model with what he did. And I am going to move to intra-arrest infusion so that the epi is not given like this, it's given like this.
Sure. No,
and I think that's the key.
Go ahead and ask her too.
But I still come back to, if you were writing the guideline, which I think can be a different standard than your protocol, because we're allowed to put what we believe in our protocols.
True.
If you're writing the guideline, what can you extrapolate from the current level of data?
So I would,
to help out here, I do think that we were just, like 30 seconds ago, criticizing the Heart Association for not sticking with the evidence, getting out in front of their evidence-based skis. So I do think that's a legitimate question, Ritu, and it's hard because I so want to say what they should do.
Well, we all want to say what they should do.
Right. It's a hard question, though.
But Peter, how would you?
So Ritu, let me just say about all the data, even the beautiful ESO data that Jeff and Remley love to kind of bathe themselves in. You and I both know that when someone gives an epinephrine dose, they're documenting that dose 2 hours later, and it's basically they're just kind of just writing it into the chart at some point in time. So all the data we have on when epinephrine is given is coming from someone's brain as to when it was given. So we don't really know.
Peter, they wrote it on the glove.
I hope so.
4 minutes, right?
I hope so. Yes,
1502.
Exactly. Wait, 1502, 1505, 1508. I get it. I know. Every chart I review is every 3 minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah. No,
it's perfect. So
Mike, I hear you.
I think we have to lower the dose and we have to extend it. So what I would say is that it's time to rethink the dose of epi. Let's say we're sticking with bolus dose epi, fine. We have to think of the dose of 1 milligram in adults, way too high, and every 3 to 5 minutes is way too frequent. And I think that there are people out there who are looking at this. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of data, so the evidence base is not replete with these types of studies. But what we do know is that a majority of children who get cardiac arrest outside of the hospital die, right? To the tune of 94%, except for one study, Paul Banerjee, who got a much higher rate of resuscitation and neurointact outcomes. And he didn't change the epi dose. He didn't. He just changed the epi timing. He changed the ventilation rate, and they stayed on scene. So I think that there's a lot of variables here, Ritu. So I don't think it's just an epi dose. I think there's a lot of BLS items that are in here that we're missing. There's a telephone CPR piece we're missing. There's a bystander CPR piece that we're missing here. So I don't think you can just say it's the epi dose here. That's going to look at everything.
Well, and I think,
Peter, let me see if I could do one thing. Sometimes the discussion gets kind of challenging to follow because frequently, and I think what Ritu and I were talking about, the population we were talking about is the paramedic 2, and we're looking at adults.
Right.
I think paramedic 2 went down to 16, but pretty adultish.
It's adult.
When are you addressing all patients, including adults, or are you primarily talking about kids?
I'm talking about adults and kids, and they're recently we put out a survey to ask all the different medical directors out there what they're doing, and there are some people who are looking at different dosages over different time periods.
Sure.
And I know that the folks at Wake County who've been doing intra-arrest epinephrine infusion for quite a while, and their cardiac arrest survival rates are pretty darn good last time I checked. So, and they've been doing that, guys, for over 10 years.
Yeah, and here, just from, I'm sorry to put my lighthouse hat back on, the challenge here is that Wake does a lot of things well. One of the biggest things they do is really focus on their pit crew approach. And I think the evidence is fairly clear that makes a difference. So the confounding variables are really strong.
There's a lot of confounding variables. I completely agree with that.
Paramedic 2 did a great job of narrowing down just epi and the dose. And I think we didn't get the results we want, meaning it's more neurologic devastation. So we have to admit, I think, that we're not getting what we want from epi. So we need to start looking, and more wasn't the answer. We've already proven that. So we need to start looking at more longer intervals and
because paramedic 2 told us that what we're doing today has zero effect on outcomes.
But it's
CPT 1 or 2, zero.
What we're doing. That's the beauty. Their reference for us to keep doing exactly what we're doing is paramedic 2, and Ian Steele's, or not Ian Steele, but it's surprising to me, and I get, and they say it with very yes, this is what you should do, and it's frustrating, and I think there are some providers out there that want just this is what you should do, but that's not the providers that listen to our shows, and that's not the type of provider that we like to have in our agencies. We want the ones who want to ask the question, and I think that's super helpful. The other thing that I think makes this really hard is that we've really so every rock paper that asks a single question about one single item, whether it's ITD, whether it's
shock early, shock late,
shock early, analyze early, analyze late. When you try to do let's keep everything the same except change one thing, you always end up with a negative trial. On the other hand, if you look at research that maybe Dr. Jarvis knows a little bit of something about, but looking at bundles of care and
intubation unrecommended.
But again, Jeff didn't change one thing in his system, right? He applied an entire framework of this is how we're going to.
And that's sort of what Chris Meeks was just talking about in the comment. It takes a lot of things to make an airplane fly, right? So they all have to be working together. So you use Wake, great system, great focus on pit crew, switching people out, being smart about where your kits are at. So maybe that's the key, and the epi doesn't matter. How do you know?
Well, so there is an answer to this. And Ritu, let me ask you how much faith you have in the CMS bundles for sepsis.
Well, it's funny you said that because
so here is where that came from. It came from Henry Ford and one paper, and it was a bundle of care, and it showed improved outcomes with a bundle of care. And that was in what, 2019, was about 2000, 2001. And we have been trying since then to pull that apart, untease it, or tease it out, and find out what makes a difference and what doesn't, because we're all in on that entire bundle. And it turns out CVP monitoring, that ain't it. And we're identifying what, and God knows it's not those blood cultures. So we got to. And I think that the way you figure this out is science is frustrating, and science is going to move at the pace it's going to move at. We just have to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. So the Paramedic 2 trial, I noticed Amber, and this is a good example of this, said, well, they didn't look at IV versus IO route. You're right. Now, Nolan and the folks, basically same authors, went back at it. They published a paper this year that said, what about the interaction between the route of administration and that placebo epinephrine? So they started taking a look at additional pieces, and they said, yeah, that doesn't make a difference. Unlike in the ROC trial with amiodarone and lidocaine, where it turns out the route does make a difference. Same thing with PART. So I think the way you have to do this is you have to ask a very specific question and randomize it. And then you just mine the shit out of it in secondary analysis to try to tease out what the right question is, and then run the next big randomized control trial on that.
But the problem with out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is we don't have the time, energy, money, and resources to take the question-by-question big randomized control trial. That's what ROC was supposed to do. Correct. And again, we were a big ROC site, right? And big rock. But we did
no pebbles there,
dude. We were fucking big. Okay, I'm just gonna put that out
there. Dr. Toon is coming after you, man.
No, I gotta. He already said that I have a potty mouth, and he's right, so it's okay. But all of those studies were negative. Every single one of them. But the amount of information that we got from those trials, because you're exactly right, Jeff, we mined the crap out of them afterwards. Absolutely. And if you look at the improvements in patient outcome around quality of compression, pre-shock pause, post-shock pause, those were all mined data out of the ROC trials. But we don't have the energy then to take those data and do another big, large randomized control trial around those.
Well, guys, we just published, I was part of a pretty large group of people who published about our bundle of care at 10 different EMS agencies across 7 different states. And again, it was all about the title of the article just came out this week is Rationale and Strategies for Development of an Optimal Bundle of Management for Cardiac Arrest. And we look at our site in Palm Beach County where we have the bundle, including heads-up CPR. And we compared ourselves to the CARES database. And the outcomes for neurointact survival for those who had witnessed arrest, bystander, shock rhythm was 41.6% versus 29.2%. And so I think, listen, I agree. We're never going to do these big studies looking at a single item anymore. It is about the bundle of care. It is about how high performance your agency is. And, questions like the single epi question is going to be a difficult question to answer. And I think it's going to come out of agencies who are doing it this way, and they do epi this way, and they do respirations or ventilations this way for us. But, back to the main point of this whole thing is that we should not be making major changes in the protocols and the guidelines, if you will, that are based on not the type of population that we majority see in EMS. It's just
that would be a good start, wouldn't it, Peter?
It would be a great start.
In an ICU, that's not our regular pediatric cardiac arrest.
I mean, would you have a plastic surgeon take out your appendix? I mean, he'd probably do a good job, but he probably never seen the inside of anything. You know?
Closure would look sweet.
Closure would be amazing.
So is it helpful to have 100 different agencies doing 100 different things? How do we learn as a greater, if everyone's doing something different, how are we ever going to really know what works?
No, I think you can do this, and there's methodology behind it. And this is really where we should put a great big fish hook through a taco and toss it over to Cedar Park and get Rimley on. Yeah. But the idea is you do ask one of those questions. So going back to Paramedic 2, since we're having fun with that one, I think it was an exceedingly well done trial. And they looked at CPR metrics. They looked at a lot of the things that we're talking about, and they included it in their model to try to even that out between the epi and placebo groups. And then you can go back in after the fact and look and get really good ideas about what is making a difference. Same way with IV and IO. Maybe it's lower extremity IOs versus upper extremity IOs. Who knows? The data is in there, and you can get a really good look at it. And when you combine multiple secondary hypotheses, these exploratories, then I think you can design your next trial. And I'm just, we say we can't get the money for large cardiac arrest trials. Well, so far, really, cardiac arrest and trauma are the only things we ever have gotten the money for.
Yeah.
Except that ROC ended up getting defunded because the NIH decided that they weren't happy with the fact that the number of trials were negative, and which is just really frustrating because the amount of information that we gleaned from those ROC trials was, I think, has led to an increase in cardiac arrest survival throughout the country. So
for much like I would say probably identical reasons that, man, why am I drawing a blank on the physician, MD PhD at Henry Ford, that wrote the Manny Rivers? I think there's no doubt that sepsis survival has improved since Rivers' paper came out. And I'm pretty sure it was 2001, by the way. Survival has improved. Is it because of the items in his bundle? I really don't think so.
No.
But we're paying more attention to it, and we've recognized the issue, and we're doing something earlier. And perhaps the same thing comes out of cardiac arrest research. We are paying more attention to it now, at least I think maybe some agencies are. And we are really being mindful of what we're doing, and we're trying to improve what we're doing based on those secondary analyses that are out there that do give us some indications.
But
so
Jeff, you bring
value in that.
You bring up a great point, which is that, the guidelines should be stressing in pediatrics to stay on scene. That should be the number one recommendation that they should have put out there in the guidelines, and they don't do it. And so I think that we really have to change the mentality. Like you said, there are agencies out there who are staying on scene, but I would say 90% of agencies out there are still not doing that for pediatrics particularly, and God knows for adults as well. Yeah.
So speaking of that, so Ritu, you did much more of your homework than I did. I only read the executive summary, and I did not see. I saw one blurb in there about termination or resuscitation, and it was about. Now there was clearly some stuff that I thought was good about prognostication after ROSC, like leave them the hell alone for 72 hours after they warm up, then start doing delayed prognostication, and I think that's a big deal for a lot of our hospitals. But the thing I saw in the field was it said it essentially implied, if not come right out and say there's no role for ultrasound in termination. And that just, I'm having a hard time with that.
So they chose their words carefully.
Yeah, they
didn't say termination.
Yeah, they didn't really say that.
Prognostication.
Say that again, Ritu. I'm sorry.
They didn't say termination. They said prognostication. So they went on to say that it is appropriate in fine print, not in the actual recommendation, to use ultrasound if in appropriately skilled hands to find reversible causes.
Okay,
such
that's
as
reasonable.
Pneumothorax but the headline is that they the Tyler Christofolli headline is that they dissed They just is Tyler with us today?
He was on here earlier. I don't know if he's still on.
The one good news is that, they were so busy
that they dissed ultrasound, but you know, and it makes some sense if you think somebody's got pericardial tamponade using your if you have a skilled operator, make sure there's, you know.
I mean, what the hell? We're doing it blind now. I'm pretty sure that we're going to increase our sensitivity and specificity with an ultrasound. So the question I was getting to though.
So there are a couple of things. Back to the drugs. The one thing that there were two things that they put in there that I think we're okay with. One, they did talk about earlier epi, specifically around. Are they spooning Austin?
So I do. I just love Austin's comment. That was beautiful.
Hey, did you want to share your screen, Ritu?
On which one?
Oh, I just remember we had talked a little bit about that. So if you want to do it, you just got to let me know because I got to move some stuff around. So
okay, well, I'll let you know if I am. Right now, I don't. Okay. But there are a couple things about the drugs. One, they recommend epi early. Well, here, you know what? Let me go ahead. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, so I'm going to just stand by. Some stuff's going to be moving, so don't panic.
And so, Ritu, I just want to put a little thing up on the board here that I want to come back to two questions, which is number one about prognostication and number two, because I think Veer has a good point about that. And then three is what did they say anything that I missed about stay and play versus load and go?
So they did not. At least I saw. Somebody saw differently. So at one point they mention kind of medicate like initiation. I have to find it, but they very specifically say that this is not guidance on when to load when to load them in the ambulance and when to initiate transport. But this is the circular rhythm thing, and I don't think it's on there.
It was very eloquent. It was very eloquent.
Yeah,
circular rhythm thing.
The circular rhythm doohickey.
Yeah,
but so they recommend in that one that if you, especially in a non-shockable rhythm, especially in a non-shockable rhythm, that you get work to get epinephrine on early, and they again used some of the data that we talked about as that, and so that's one thing. So they did kind of address that, and then the other thing that we've talked about on both Lighthouse as well as on Second Shift was the issue of where do you start an IV or where do you obtain access, and they recommend they have come out and recommended IV access is preferential to IO access. Okay. They did not state that you would prefer an upper extremity IO to a lower extremity IO.
And so my guess is that's real, by the way, but I don't think we have good evidence for it. We're all just guessing on the IO thing. Not the IO versus IV, because I think at least with antidysrhythmics, there's decent evidence. But the upper extremity IO versus lower, I think it's real, but I think we're guessing.
Yeah, and if you look at the data that we're looking at, we're really comparing an upper extremity IV to a lower extremity IO.
Right.
Correct.
Because
that's correct.
The two big studies,
proximal tibia. That's right.
Yeah, the two big studies, there was not a lot of humeral IO going on in their data set. So what we don't know the answer to is whether a humeral IO is equivalent to an upper extremity IV or an IJ or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, EJ, sorry.
Yeah. Or IJ.
Or IJ.
And probably at the end of the day, it's not about the drugs anyway, right? We're talking about all these IO and IV and meds and so forth. But, I think there's probably just a lot of BLS stuff in the middle that a lot of agencies, I think, may be missing. In my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think there's good evidence for that now. I don't think we need a huge randomized control trial that says do good CPR versus shitty CPR. IRBs notwithstanding, I think there's good evidence for that now. I think that gets us over to improvement science as opposed to clinical science. And that's how do you get those improvements in place? And then what I think is a really big deal, how do you get them to stick? And that's the challenge.
Well, I think if you look at like what the Resuscitation Academy's done, right?
Yeah.
So the importance on, dispatcher CPR, putting AEDs in the back of cop cars, encouraging, citizen bystanders to engage using things like pulse point.
Yeah.
So like a lot of that, that's where I think that's where the money's at. I mean, that's where the survival comes from.
Yeah. What's the 80-20 rule, right?
What's that?
The 80-20 rule. So 80% of the benefits going to come from 20% of the interventions, and the interventions are defibrillation, CPR, and early recognition.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Mike and guys, let me ask you, how many times are the cops on scene before we are?
It's so funny. I was just going to mention that there's a town just down in Washington County, Sherwood, Oregon, that I think I'm going back to 2018, that their police were on scene 100% of the time before anyone else. 100%.
Right. And how many times are they in a triangle? How many times are we kicking them out? Right. And then we have a cop. I have a video, and I hope none of my people in my agency are watching right now, but we have a video at a Vietnamese restaurant where I had one of my best medics.
You've shown me the video.
Yeah, right. We have a cop doing this on the radio. We have my lieutenant just sitting there doing one-handed CPR, and the other guy's at the med box. Okay. I mean, so the cop is being underutilized. They're not being kind of brought into the triangle. And when they should be the first people to be in the triangle, they could be position 1 or position 2. We can come in and fill position 3 rather than kicking them out and then having a single hand on the chest for a 300-pound guy in cardiac arrest. It's ridiculous. Yeah. One of those.
I mean, I'll feel, I will say that I feel pretty in the little tiny town that I live in, where I've been the medical director here for 15 years versus just the couple years I've been of our whole county. Our cops are first on scene about 85% of the time. They start compressions every time, and bring an AED to every scene, and this is all leadership from my former police chief, who's now my fire chief. But and then when we arrive on scene, they just become part of the line. They are every third person. They're still doing compressions until we get like our 7. We have an abundance of resources sometimes. So by the time we get like our third or fourth apparatus, they can kind of take a break.
So if you don't mind, so first off, way to go. Strong work on that. I think that's important. But next, I want to go back to the termination thing. And so you said they don't really address where to do the resuscitation versus when to transport. I
remember actually, let me check that. So I do remember there is a statement early in the guidelines that basically says, don't move the patient, in the sense that, don't transport them, but like, don't move them. They generally recommend that you work a resuscitation where it happens, unless it's safety, but it's not. But then they put in parentheses, this does not meant to be a recommendation to determine when or whether or not you go to the hospital. It's just the idea that if a code occurs in the living room, that you shouldn't put them on the stretcher and run the code in the back of the ambulance because you like it better there. Does that make sense?
Not really. So I'm just curious, because just going back to the evidence, I think there is some decent evidence. Another paper just recently published that looks at working patients on scene versus transporting.
That great paper in JAMA.
Brian Grinnell. Yep.
What I'm not aware of now, it seems obvious to me, but so they make a statement about not putting them on a stretcher and moving them to an ambulance. I don't see shit for evidence on that, as long as the ambulance doesn't drive. So it's funny that they look at that and say there's evidence for that, but not continuing to work them on scene.
Well, and again, these just came out last week, and I tried to read through them as well as I could on the adult side, but
hopefully they do say something.
Did not. they really did not want to address the when you go to the hospital question. They do have termination rules about when it's okay to terminate on scene, which
so
are
that was the second part I wanted to talk about. Yeah.
for a long time. They haven't changed those. And frankly, we would never use those rules because we would be transporting way more patients who don't survive.
So let me ask you about that. You said what they were using the somewhere in Canada, right? Toronto.
Yeah.
I guess the way we do our termination is we work our codes for 40 minutes and then they call me, which stops the protocol, right? And then it becomes a physician decision, judging, bringing all the stuff in. So when they're talking about the Toronto criteria, are they saying, okay, just absent physician involvement?
Here's their, they don't say anything like that.
Let me blow you up.
Their termination and resuscitation rule. I don't know if you want to slide it so that.
Yeah, hold on a sec. Hold on.
All right, there you go.
Make it bigger.
That's as big as I can make it. Well, no, hold on a sec. I can make it bigger.
Yeah, I think you're bigger and mine bigger. Don't.
This is as good as we're going to do it. If I make it full screen, I'm going to drop us all out, and it just gets weird. So
yeah, don't do that.
Fine. That's good right there, Ritu.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so you got to have all four of these things to terminate on scene. So unwitnessed, no bystander CPR, never got ROSC, and never gave a shock.
Yeah.
If you have those four things, then they recommend that you can consider field termination of resuscitation. This is not even remotely how the high-performing systems. My Utstein survival is pretty similar to what Peter just said. So I know I'm doing a pretty good job, and I'm also not driving really fast with people in the back of an ambulance doing manual compressions and getting knocked around. So this is the Toronto criteria. And it's stuck around forever. This actually is 2010. But you said, I think there's some recent data that would argue against this. And this is not any kind of procedure that we're following. I'm an AHA plant. I don't think
guys,
so.
I just had Brian Brunel. I have a weekly kind of Florida webinar now that I do, and I invite smart people on. And I had Brian Brunel on. I just started it, so I need all you guys on.
Just
but basically,
clear, I beat you, Ritu. I beat you.
Yeah,
thank you, Peter.
Right. He was on. That's right. Twice. No, I'm kidding. But basically, Brian basically said there is absolutely no reason to transport patients unless you have an excellent eCPR program, and even then, the rate of survival on those programs is quite low. And when you're looking at the inclusion criteria, there are very few patients out there that meet the inclusion criteria to even get into the eCPR program. And so he would emphatically say that there's no reason to move patients who are in cardiac arrest, and he's, of course, speaking adult here, for any reason, again, except if you have that particular patient who's younger, who's got a good, who had very low downtime, very short downtime, and you have an eCPR center. So, that's my, I live in that camp.
Yeah, and that's our same philosophy too. Is what I often say is the juice has to be worth the squeeze, and it's a Florida thing, right? Orange juice, all that stuff.
Nature's best.
But what are we getting?
It's like a lemon squeeze.
What are we getting when we get to the hospital? And unless we're getting something that we don't have in the field, then it's not worth it. It's not worth the risk to my crew.
Yep.
And it's not worth the risk to the public for an outcome. And there's also, I think it's in PEDS, there's a lot of data that says well, the false hope idea is, giving the family some kind of hope is a good thing, and that's total bullshit too.
Total bullshit.
Yeah. So I, and to me, that juice is if there's a good ECPR program, if you think there's something fixable, and the two things that would be fixable that I can't fix would be if for whatever reason you think there's a pericardial tamponade and you can, manage the patient. If this is a witnessed VF arrest and you have an aggressive cath lab that may be willing to take them to the cath lab while they're in cardiac arrest, that would be a reason to go. But that changes everything, right? That turns VF into a load and go. VF is at that point no longer a stay and play; it's a load and go. Or the only we had a long conversation about, or maybe pulmonary embolus, right?
So the PE question I thought was really interesting because at least in the executive summary, they addressed it. And I think they addressed it in the place that it should have been addressed. And the one thing I did like about this document is that after each section, they said, here are the questions that we need better evidence for.
It sounds like we hate them.
No, I think they're in a difficult situation. It's a hard job.
That we know and like.
Yep.
And I will say that compared to the mid 90s when everything was about which drug company gave them the most money, that seems to be sort of
amiodarone
less, which is what we all prefer now, by the way. But then there's a really neat section where they have these are all the research questions that we really think need to be asked.
Yeah.
And that's really pretty cool. So I think that there's got to be some specific reason to transport. And the other thing too, reading through all this stuff, reading their airway things and reading some of the reasoning they have. If you read the section on termination, there is a little bit of still, bring in that extra expertise of the doctor. Because the hospital and the doctor, dude, if I fall over, please, I want to fall over at a fire station or
no joke,
or next to one of our EMS postings,
absolutely,
and not at a hospital. This idea that the hospital are the experts in running cardiac arrests.
Have you ever worked in a hospital?
Oh shit!
By the way, they still talk about the colorimeter in the guidelines. The colorimeter. That's what they want to use to see if it turns yellow or purple. I mean, really?
Oh, CO2.
We're talking about CO2.
That's in the fucking guidelines. Colorimeters.
You
can't find a capnography, a continuous waveform capnography in most hospitals you go into.
Peter, are you talking about those little things that make a really nice sound when you flick them out of the RT's hand?
Yes.
Oh my God, my RT.
Now I know what you're talking about.
Take that out. I'm like, get that away. That should not even be allowed in my room. And they're like, what? I'm like,
we'll put those over in the corner with the backboards.
Yeah.
Right. The people who are telling us how to run cardiac arrest are the people who are telling us to use a colorimeter in the guidelines. Who, when you go into their own hospitals, and I've worked at CHOP, you have a hard time finding a continuous waveform capnography. So, anyway, I'm on a rant here, but it's beyond the pale that here we are talking about cardiac arrest and the nuances of cardiac arrest, where all of us on the call and all the people who are commenting here understand that the specifics count and the details count, and so. That's why I think I'm a little perturbed here.
Let me go back a little bit here to Ritu. We kind of got on the only reason to transport these patients is if there is something that can be done there where we're going that we can't do here and justifies the risk. And great big old LAD occlusion is one of the big ones. So if your guys aren't going to cath, then I don't care how clear the case is, it doesn't justify the risk because they're not going to do it.
Right.
I see Tim down here was asking about thrombolytics. So let's take a look at this in two ways on thrombolytics. I don't think there's any evidence for intra-arrest thrombolytics in VF. I know that it has been done, but I'm not aware of any evidence that said it works. But there was at least one of the questions in there, and this is a huge question I have. Your arrest patient who has, let's say you have ultrasound on scene, you see a big dilated right ventricle, you see a DVT. Should you give intra-arrest TPA?
But I think that
address that anyway, other than as a research question.
You know, I'm not a big ultrasound like guru by any stretch. I do use ultrasound as a tool in the emergency department. And I do use it occasionally on cardiac arrest. Certainly I use it to look for pericardial effusion and that sort of thing. I think that dilated right ventricle is a tough call in the setting of arrest, because as soon as the heart stops pumping, you have sort of back up into the venous system. And so I think it's really hard to know whether you're seeing a bigger right ventricle because there's no pumping or limited pumping versus a big PE. That's just sort of my take. You know, we have one of my guys is very into ultrasound, and I would ask him. He does not do that though in the cardiac arrests.
So I'll tell you, we're using ultrasound right now in my smaller system, and the way we do it is I'm basically looking for wall motion, and I have them do the ultrasound and I FaceTime them. So I'm actually the one looking at it in real time. And the situation that I'm not doing this now, so I don't know, but it occurs to me that the way we might do it is they call me and say, listen, we have, here's the story. Femur fracture in France. They just got onto an airplane after having it surgically repaired, came back. They got this great big swollen leg, and here's the ultrasound. So,
why do you need an ultrasound in that case?
Okay, maybe I overplayed the history.
It's not like he's got a giant sign over his head that goes, I have a
PE. Notes itself, make a more subtle case.
That? Come on, man.
So my point is that perhaps the combination of history and ultrasound might lead me to do it. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to I can't really justify putting TPA out there right now just for that circumstance.
I got to quote Veer on something before we ask Peter his thoughts on this.
Yeah.
It's cracking me up, which is Veer. And we got to have Veer on the show, by the way, Mikey.
Yeah, let's do it.
But Veer talking about the colorimetric change.
Yes.
I open it, I blow into it while maintaining eye contact with RT, then through.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Peter, what do you think on the whole
PE thing?
On the kind of PE and ultrasound?
Well, we just started using PE ultrasound at the Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, and we're only using it at this point in time for, with cardiac arrest, just to make sure, just to kind of see if there's any cardiac wall motion. We're looking at the vena cava, but we're not really at the point at this point to look at. I mean, I have to say we're not there yet. Looking at PE.
Well, just a time check here. We are at about an hour and 35 minutes, and we still have a lot of people watching. So, I mean, not that we can't go to bed, because we could. But do you want to try to hit on anything else, or do you want to call this one a good one, or what do you want to do? What do you guys think?
So, I don't know. We could probably go on and just beat the crap out of AHA, primarily because we're not the ones who had to make the decisions for quite a while. But Mike, we talked about this a little bit. I understand y'all had a great training scenario. You want to do maybe a little case here? maybe
Sure.
see if we can get our esteemed audience here to tee up on this case.
Yeah, we can do that.
See how it looks like this.
Let me do this. I got to bring up some slides. You won't be able to see them, but I have to remember what we talked about.
This the one that we did?
Yeah. So really, Jeff, what I want to do, especially since Peter's on here, is I want to cover a case for a pediatric fall victim.
Okay.
Okay. And so I'm going to bring up my slides here just so I can keep my memory straight.
I love
Yeah,
it.
I just
Pediatric.
I
Like,
don't actually need
no
them.
evidence exists.
I'm sorry. On this doggone thing, when two people talk, it cancels everybody out. So I didn't hear a single word anyone just said there. What'd you say, Ritu?
Oh, I said, do we need to use the slides? I mean,
If you want to. Yeah.
we don't have to.
Yeah. No, pull them up on your thing. That'd be great, actually.
Oh, I got to get them. I don't.
Oh, well, see if you can get them real quick, because it would probably be easier.
Well, Mike, while Ritu is pulling the thing up on his thing,
Yes.
take a look at Veer's question, and I think that was he suggested perhaps we say, what is our takeaway from these guidelines, and what are we going to change? Presumably, he's here talking about AHA, and I can certainly start us off and go, wait, not a damn thing.
Fair enough.
Right. I'll say that I've already changed my symptomatic bradycardia away from giving cardiac arrest dose epi, and I'm also certainly not going to be changing the ventilation rate.
So you're changing your protocol to say don't do that.
Exactly. Two contrary things to what the AHA is saying. But then again, we haven't typically followed the AHA guidelines for many years.
Yeah.
Should we take a poll and see when the last time we took an ACLS class was?
I can't even tell you.
It was 2005 for me, my intern year.
This is 2013. I want to say 2013 for me.
Yeah, I would say at least
I used
2010.
ACLS instructor for till about 2010, mostly because our till 2014 actually, because our residents were required to take ACLS, and I wanted to make sure there was somebody telling them what parts to ignore in the class.
Fair enough.
But so Joe Zalkin asked, well, who follows these quote unquote guidelines?
No, why?
Why follow them? Well,
because it's easier than reading the literature for yourself.
yeah, but I think if you're a low performing EMS system, you'll probably do better if you follow these guidelines than if you don't.
Okay.
Kind of like ATLS.
Yeah.
If you're that person in a plane crash, wherever that story was from.
I mean, we don't follow the guide. We review them when the changes come out. And I know John Jew was involved in some of these, but we haven't changed our protocols based on the ACLS guidelines since guidelines 05.
Yep.
I think 05 was the really big change that made and that was probably was it 05 was the really big kind of CPR push, or was that guideline 10?
I think it was. I think it was 5.
So that was the most impactful change they've ever done, and it focused on BLS and it focused on choreography, and that's probably the time where we looked at. But I think we're reading the same literature that they're using and making informed decisions, every year based on that literature.
But you know what, guys? I mean, listen, I think my biggest concern is that they're going away from the team dynamic. They're going away from in-person training. It's basically just trying to get the people through, walk up to a wagon, push a couple of times, breathe a couple of times, watch a couple of videos. And these are the people that I have to resuscitate children in an emergency department with. I think there should be a separate group of pre-hospital guidelines and people making those guidelines, and a separate group for in-hospital guidelines and people making those guidelines. It's two separate populations. There's not enough of a voice of the EMS pre-hospital. We are the experts in cardiac arrest, but hands down. And there's no hospital person going to tell me how to run a cardiac arrest anymore. I'll tell you that.
God damn, boy.
Damn right. Right? Yeah. And I wish every freaking paramedic out there understood that we are not taking cardiac arrest to a hospital for a lower standard of care, right? And why are there agencies out there who still don't understand that? I still don't understand that.
Yeah, but I mean, so I'm looking at the adult guidelines, and the first author on the adult guidelines is Ash Punchal. He's an EMS guy, right? The third author is Jose Cabañas. He's an EMS guy. We love him.
You might know something about EMS.
Yeah, but you know what? Hold on a second. I spoke to Jose yesterday, and he was mainly in on the mechanical CPR part of it. They work in sections, right? So Jose wasn't at the head of the bed in this particular case, right?
Got it.
And I believe that's El Presidente to you, Peter.
President-elect.
I love that guy. Let me tell you what. He could do no wrong in my book.
Yeah, good guy. And congratulations, Jose.
Yes, Jose is the man. That he will continue on in the long line of highly effective NEMSP presidents.
I wonder who some of those might be.
I said that effective
former El Presidente.
That's right.
So I know I think you were still looking for
perpetuity, by the way.
What's that?
Once you were president, you were always referred to as Mr. President.
Ah, very good. I think you were looking for a case.
Do we have time to do this case? It's been an hour, 45 minutes.
I don't know. Mike's in charge.
We're a little long in the tooth.
That's a first.
And then,
I mean, here's the thing. We're gonna do this again.
All right.
Come on. Hey, dude, you guys aren't going to have me on again. It's a freaking pediatric case. Put it on.
All right, let's do it. Load that shit up.
Do you want me to load the slides?
Yeah, load them up.
Dude, the nightly news hasn't even aired by you yet. Over here, it's almost midnight. I'm still awake. Come on.
And I got up at 4:30 for a morning shift, and I'm awake.
My Timbers are at halftime, but they're up 3-0, so it's not a big deal.
So up the slides so I can make your screen big.
So while you're doing that, I think that I think Vera makes a good point. So we read the literature ourselves, and I think we are capable of taking a look at the literature and writing our protocols to where we think the literature is, and we can defend that. I think the people who are listening to this can do the same thing. There are a lot of other systems, let's say. And I don't want to completely throw out the baby with the bathwater. I do think there is some value to ACLS. I think the things we're quibbling about are probably on the periphery. So I don't want to be overly critical of it. And I do think it's better than folks who don't do anything.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think guidelines in general are good.
Yeah.
At NEMSP, we started an evidence-based guidelines consortium because there's benefit to guidelines. And so it's just, it's just sometimes it's frustrating kind of where they go. It's okay to disagree with them. I also think it's okay to not follow them if you have the appropriate justification, experience, all quality improvement, all those pieces to sort of demonstrate to your public that we may not follow these guidelines, but we have outcomes that are every bit as good as anybody else's.
Hey, Ritu, you got a window there, man. Did somebody fall out of that thing?
Well, that's the case, right?
Good segue, man.
Yeah, I mean that. So we do our multi-agency training twice a year. Usually we present cases with simulation, adult and peds, have our crews work in teams. But we have been able to do that since the situation. So this was our second run at our multi-agency training that we did as a virtual training. And what we did this time is we had cases, and instead of just presenting the cases, we had basically Mike be the responding paramedic.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So let's run this that way as well. But what will make this case even better for the 50 people that are still watching?
Strong work, guys.
Yes, thank you for that. Staying strong with us, and this will be about another half hour or so, but it's well worth it if you want to hang in. I think there's going to be some real good learning points here.
Reload.
What's that? Did somebody say something?
No, go ahead, Mike. I was being a smart ass.
Oh, okay. So anyway, so if you guys want to run this call with me, you can be my phone a friend. So the people that are out there watching, let's get through this and we'll get started. So go for it, Ritu.
So just like we did it Yep. All right. Yep. Well, something's happened in the world. Shit's gone bad. And you're responding to calls again. I don't know how it happened.
Yeah, if I'm out there doing this, something's really gone bad.
Something's wrong. You get dispatched to a call.
Perfect.
6-year-old fall out of a window. They are according to dispatch, they're inside the house. They are conscious and breathing.
Not conscious but breathing?
They are not unconscious but breathing, because butt breathing is,
Yeah.
Does your dispatch say that? They're unconscious butt breathing.
I don't think that tube connects to where you think it connects.
All right. So basically, there's a couple things. As I'm responding to this call, I'm sort of getting my hackles up because number one, it's a kid call. So right off the bat, that raises my temperature a little bit, makes my tummy feel a little bit weird. And I'm thinking about a number of things. Number one, not one of these again, because this happens all the time. That's the first thing I'm thinking. Number two is, why didn't I trade out of this shift? So that's the other thing I'm thinking. But no, as we're going,
is where that
three, you're like, Pete Antevy's going to hear about this call.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm doing it in front of him, world famous guy. Anyway, so I'm thinking about a number of things on the way. I want to know, 6 years old. What did he land? What's at the bottom? Was there luckily a mattress down there and he fell on it? I don't know. So I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about going back to the normal, like skill sheets, right? Like I preach on this all the time, is I love the skill sheets because it keeps you organized in your thought process, right? Especially if you're newer or you're still trying to figure out things. That the skill sheet sort of method in my brain makes a lot of sense. So I'm thinking, do I have enough people coming? Do I need additional? Do I need a helicopter? Where am I at? Where am I in relation to my closest trauma center, my pediatric center? So I'm thinking about all that stuff. And in a typical response scenario, let's say I've got either a 3-person engine or a 4-person truck or 4-person fire apparatus. We'll just leave it, make it easier. And I have a 2-person medic unit that's coming. So that's 6 people, up to 6 people. That's probably good for now. And depending on where we're at, do I need a helicopter? So am I in an urban area? Am I what's the story with that?
We can change it around, but you're suburban, probably 15 minutes away from the trauma center. Our trauma center is on a hill. So the problem is when you're at the bottom of the hill, you're still 15 minutes away. So
that's the truth. Well, okay. At this point,
I'm just on the top of a mountain. Don't think. All right.
Yeah. Basically, okay.
So the interstate exit, that's where you want to be.
Yeah. Okay. So that's
point out that Allison thinks it's quite funny that you called him world famous.
Oh, well. That's probably actually Peter saying that because he was running her Facebook earlier.
I don't have a personal Facebook. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Can I get back to the damn case?
Yes. So you roll up on the scene.
And you said they're inside.
What?
You said they're inside.
But what's the other piece though that you can do in prep that you didn't cover?
Well,
Andrew already did it.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I'm going to be thinking about is one is I'm going to be getting our pediatric guide out and I'm going to be thinking, what's a 6-year-old? Because there's a lot of stuff that I don't want to have to remember, especially normal vital signs for a 6-year-old. I couldn't tell you. So I don't want to have to remember that. So I'm going to refer to our pediatric guide, which I can pull up on my phone or pull out the hard copy. So I'm going to be doing that.
We have a homegrown pediatric guide that is far superior to anything commercially available.
We opted for a commercially available product.
Growing laughter coming from that corner.
We like our age-based system.
Hey, imitation is the best form of flattery. I get it. Okay.
Is age better or youth better? No, I'm just kidding. Let's get back to this.
Come on, this kid's dead already. Let's go. Hurry up.
I could have been at the damn hospital. Come on.
All right. You want to just go with scenario? Oh, shoot. You want to go?
I hate it when my cat steps on the forward button.
I know.
Yes, just go with scenario 1.
Scenario 1. So don't even pay attention. We can talk about scenario 2 later. Yeah. So you roll into the door with your 16-person engine that's got double union coverage, and there's lots of people. So you roll through, and there's some family hanging around, and there's a kid laying there on the ground.
Okay. Is the kid moving, or does the kid pay attention to me as I walk in?
So you walk in, you kind of walk up to the kid, and not a lot of movement going on.
Okay. I don't like that.
Closed.
All right. So I'll have somebody grab some C-spine, and I'm going to come up and ask the parents, what's his name?
We didn't ever give him a name. We did this 3 days in a row. We never gave him a name.
Christ's sake. Just flow. It's Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy.
Billy
Jimmy,
boy.
Jimmy boy, are you okay? Does he respond to my voice?
No.
Okay, I don't like this. I'm going to give him a little string rub. Does he respond to that?
Yep. He withdraws to pain. He opens his eyes. He kind of makes some noises at you.
Okay. So then I'm going to go through my kind of rapid trauma initial assessment real quick. So what's his airway? Is it open? Is it making a noise? Is there blood, teeth, puke, anything in his airway?
There's no blood. He's not puking. There's maybe some upper respiratory kind of airway noises, little gurgly, but not there's movement of air.
Okay. So I'm going to have the person that's holding that C-spine. Can you give me a little jaw thrust? Does that help with that?
Yep. Is he going to hold the C-spine with one hand and jaw thrust with the other?
You can sort of do it like this.
All right. Yep.
Okay.
That works.
Okay. And what's his respiratory rate and quality?
Respiratory rate's 24.
Okay. And so what I know about that, because I looked at my pediatric guide, that's on the upper end of normal. That's a little fast. And is it shallow? Is it deep? Is it what's happening with his quality?
It's reasonably good. It's not, taking full breaths.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a non-rebreather on him at this point, and I want to check his lung sounds and feel the chest stability.
Chest is stable. No, there's no crepitus. The lung sounds are equal.
Okay. And there was no puddles of blood anywhere. Is he bleeding out any
hematoma on the back of his head with a laceration? There's like a couple hundred cc's of blood, but he's not actively bleeding.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. So we've got our ABCs done, rapid trauma stuff. So I'm going to say this kid's a priority. We need to get this kid sort of on the road. So I would have somebody step aside. At the same time, we've obviously got somebody getting vital signs for me. We need to enter this kid into the trauma system in Oregon. Well, I guess we use sort of the national. So he's got some physiological stuff. He's got a fall of twice his height or more. And plus I got the heebie-jeebies. So that's enough for me.
Right. And then the reality is with most of our trauma system entries, you get the heebie-jeebies and then you figure out which criteria they meet afterwards.
Right. But again, the good news is we just have discretion. So if I want to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to do it. All right. So these are my vital signs. So it's hard to see, but I can tell you that his blood pressure is 89/60. His heart rate is 89. I don't like that. His CO2 is 51. Okay. That's a bad sign. And his O2 sat is 91. So, obviously, I don't see any other distracting injuries as I just look up and down this kid. Quick head to toe, nothing. Okay. So we're dealing with a head injury here.
Your partner put this on right away. So this is even before you put oxygen on.
Well, that's okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Just go with it. So I'm a little worried about his sats. I'm a little worried about this end tidal CO2, especially when we're dealing with a traumatic brain injury, right? We got to watch these H bombs. So I got to keep an eye on the H bombs. I don't want him to be hypoxic, which he already is headed that way. I don't want him to be hypotensive, which according to my PEDS guide, his vital signs are a little soft right now. So I don't like that very much. And so we've got some issues here. So I'm at a crossroads of airway management with this kid. So we did a jaw thrust that fixed his, upper respiratory noises. What happens if I try to give him an OPA?
He doesn't, I think earlier we said he had a little bit of a gag. We'll call it a deep gag. So if you put a little OPA in, you're basically able to hold his airway open just fine with the OPA or just with your simple jaw thrust.
Okay. Well,
tell me what a GCS is.
I'm sorry. One more time.
GCS.
With this kid, I'm going to give him a 2 for eyes, 2 for verbi, and motor. I'll give him a 4, so I'll give him an 8.
Okay.
So
GCS of 8, you must.
Yeah.
No.
Documented.
I have to intubate him, right? I mean, isn't that what the protocol says? Less than 8, because it rhymes, right? So that must be true.
If it rhymes, then you must. Rhyme.
So then we're getting to the crux of the situation. Let's get this. We got the OPA in, and we're going to start assisting his ventilations with a BVM. I want to try to bring his sats up. I want to try to bring that end tidal down, and let's get a little balance here. Let's get a little bit towards normal. So after, a couple of minutes of sort of BVMing, gentle, soft, appropriate tidal volumes, all that stuff, what does my O2 sat and my end tidal do?
So your end tidal is like 41 and your O2 sat is 97%.
Okay. This is the jam up that I find myself in.
Right.
And here's the question to you people that are watching and the things that I want you to give some feedback in on the comments. I've achieved what I feel at this time right now. I've achieved airway management. I've controlled his H's that I'm worried about, his H bombs. And I feel like we should get going with that. The question is, how many of you out there think that I need to RSI this kid right now? That's the question. I feel like I've got a 15-minute transport. I can take help with me. I've completely managed his airway with BLS. It's more important to me at this point to have a well oxygenated and physiologically sort of sound kid than a hypoxic traumatic brain injury with a tube.
Mike, remind me how old the kid is.
6.
So Ed wants to know, it's great to see Ed Palmer on here. You know Ed, right, Mike?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's great to see Ed. Ed was our pitcher on our softball team. He wants to know if the GCS improves. We've got GCS of 8 equals it can wait.
That was nice. And points for the rhyme.
Amber says DSI. William Troon keeps getting messed up by the word soft. Our buddy Daniel wants to take the airway. Nick's with you.
Thank you, Nick. So I guess here's my justification, because I know that there's a lot of people that feel like they should take the airway, right? And I don't know that that's wrong, but I'll tell you what gives me, Mike Verkes, pause. And you may or may not like this, Dr. Antevy, and even Dr. Jarvis, or maybe even not Ritu, but
that's why you don't usually get to run calls. So
yeah. The thing is I have intubated hundreds of people, but I've probably intubated 6 kids. So that my own, I feel like I don't want to let my ego create a hypoxic situation for this kid. I feel like I have managed his airway appropriately. Could he throw up and could we have a mess on our hands? Yeah, but what if he doesn't? And listen, I'm not the kind of person I used to be. In terms of when I get to the hospital, they're gonna probably RSI this kid, right? I'm not gonna go out in the lot and beat myself because they intubated this kid, and maybe I should have done that. I don't.
Please don't beat yourself in the ambulance bay.
You know,
just make sure you turn your Zoom window off there, Mr. Tubin.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we heard about that. But anyway, I just feel like you know, so let's just say he pukes. Like, can we not handle? Did we not know how to suction people? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying RSI-ing the kid or DSI-ing the kid is a terrible idea. I just feel like in this moment, right now, there is no airway problem, and so what's wrong with that?
I'm curious as to Peter and Jeff's take on this.
Yeah, I'll start. So I think that the Ben Barbaro, Dan Spate trial from Arizona, the EPIC trial, answered these questions, right? And they had thousands and thousands of patients, albeit mostly were adults. Absolutely, 100%, this child should not go hypoxic, should not go hypotensive. This kid probably needs some fluids, right, already. And he definitely is a non-rebreather. Throw him a dose of Zofran if you want, but this kid's got an epidural until proven otherwise, right? And at the end of the day, you absolutely should just drive this kid with your OPA, bagging effectively. And, you know, if the end tidal is 45, 50, I'm okay with that. Where most people will screw this up is that they'll end up in the ER with an end tidal of 25. Right. And we know that every time you go 3 points down below the normal value, you're causing vasoconstriction of the brain. And so you can mechanically just cause this kid some major problem if you try to intubate this kid and paralyze the kid and get the tube in the wrong place, or inevitably focus so much on the airway that you have hypoxic episodes. And for God's sakes, you've forgotten about the hypotension that you cause from the paralytics. This kid will end up having a bad outcome. And so I'm with Ben and Dan on this one, and I would go with what EPIC TBI tells you to do. So Mike, I'm with you 100%.
So it's interesting. Number one, notice Daniel, he's one of my medics, says that's why we have an iGel. So intubating is not an option. We don't intubate kids at all. And our distinction, by the way, is if you can't take the wide King Vision blade in your mouth, then you're a kid, and we don't intubate you. So I'm not particularly torn on this particular patient because I think you could go either way. Do you place a supraglottic or do you not? I think it's a judgment call, and I think you can make a case for either one. I think the more important question is where do you do something? And I don't want you, if you're going to go ahead and place an iGel, that's fine. Just go. Do it en route. Because I think the key thing, the number one thing, my differentiation on this is highly dependent on what the CAT scan shows. So we need to scan the kid. You're already taking care of oxygenation. The one thing that we know about intubation is that the odds of first pass success drop with age. Some really cool guy did a really cool paper on this. So our first pass success is lower with kids than it is with older ones because we just don't do it very often. And when you're intubating them, your odds of hypoxia go up pretty high. And we know that you have, from the EPIC trial, you have an odds ratio of freaking death of 6.6. So a 560% increase in the risk of death with one episode of hypoxia, or a 1,200% increase if you have one episode of hypoxia and hypotension. So do it en route. And don't fiddle fart around. Make sure you don't get those H-bombs.
This is a really good segue. And Ritu, I don't know if you're going to go there, but
that was my question is, it was interesting to hear Jeff Jarvis, of all people, say, do the airway en route. Now,
this is one of the few times I'll say that, by the way.
I guess specifically where you're different than what we are doing in our system is that you are doing rapid sequence airway and placing a supraglottic, correct?
That is an option.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it if you don't need. And it sounds like this kid took an OPA like a champ. I would be highly tempted to just leave well enough alone and go.
Yeah.
So my number one thing here is go. But if you are determining for whatever reason while you're en route that what you're doing now isn't working and you need to place an iGel, you do have an option of ketamine and rocuronium to place the iGel.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's again, that's super interesting because one of the points that we talk about in this training, and again, we do intubate children. And one of the options that we talk about with using DSI, a tool that Jeff Jarvis knows quite well, possibly, is it's, and there's no data necessarily, but it's my thought process that if you are trying to do this en route, that your likelihood of getting an H-bomb, especially if you're going to do an intubation, is a lot higher than if your likelihood of getting that H-bomb occur if you stop, pause, look around, look at your friends, and do a more controlled situation before rolling down the road.
Reasonable case, which is the reason that I really make a distinction between trauma and medicine.
Yeah.
For almost all of our medicine patients, they are by far better served from us slowing the hell down and making sure we're doing this right. On our trauma patients, however, they're particularly this kid, we think he's got blood in his brain, and the kid needs a pop-off valve. And I think he probably needs that more than a piece of plastic in his oropharynx. So I think we need to go. And I think the speed of transport here is important, whereas the majority of the patients that we're intubating, I don't think it's as important.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So let me change up the procedure a little bit, or the situation. And so, I mean, in this situation, we're like 10 or 15 minutes away. You've got really good airway control. And, you know, it's interesting is we got feedback from a trauma center that this kid should have been intubated before. And my response is like,
dare you make me do something in the ER?
No, you're wrong. You're wrong. And part of it is hindsight is 2020, right? So the kid vomited. And so they're like, well, the kid vomited during transport, so you should have intubated him, which was, I think, Daniel's point too. But you know, the way our protocols are written and the way we kind of teach this case, these are these are loosely based on real situations. But let's say you are now, I don't know, 65 minutes by ground, or you're transporting the kid to a landing zone where their kid's going to be put into an aircraft. Mm-hmm. How does that change your thought process?
So the aircraft definitely does, unless you're, say, you know, Starflight in Austin, Travis County, and you have a helicopter the size of, you know, roughly speaking, Travis County. Most of the aircraft are going to be space limited. So you're going to have, it's going to be really difficult to manage the airway. So if you think there is going to be an issue with airway management, you're by far better off taking care of it on the ground before you go. That's not the situation in the ground. Sometimes it is, but the majority of times it's not. We have big ambulances. We have lots of people on scene. We can put a lot of people in the back of the ambulance. Sometimes it's not necessarily a good thing, but we usually are not in our situation, we're not short of people. So we can get enough people. And our process really, if we're going to do aggressive airway management, we have one person that we just say, your job is to stare at that monitor. Really pay attention to the blood pressure and the oxygen saturation. If you don't have the resources to do that, then keep on with your BLS stuff.
Hey, Peter, or I guess Jeff even, what are your thoughts on push dose for this kid with soft vitals? Are you good with that? How are you gonna? What kind of dose would you give with them?
That was a specific question we were going to have for Peter, right? When we talked about
and I absolutely think that the evidence bears that out. That in trauma patients, you could give and should give push pressor epi. Listen, I R&D'd this from Jeff as far as ripped off and duplicated. The fact that we now make sure that these cases, and I would agree that if it's a longer transport or needs air, that we would manage that airway on scene prior to them going in the chopper.
Yeah.
We do have DSI. We do intubate children if we need to. Obviously, the cardiac arrest patient gets an eye gel. The child who's a smoke inhalation, has a burn in upper airway, they get intubated using DSI. But fluids and push pressor epi, I think most systems that I'm familiar with who are only 10, 15 minutes away, they disregard that low-ish blood pressure. And, I'm emphatic with everyone that I talk to that it takes the ER much longer to manage a hypotensive kid than it would in EMS, right? And so, I'm a big fan of giving fluids. I'm a big fan of giving a push pressor epi. And I think that most agencies should adopt at least some mechanism, move away from dopamine, move away from these, drip, where it'll take you 15, 20 minutes just to get the kid's blood pressure up. And that's why most people haven't addressed blood pressure in kids for so many years. And so I'm a big fan of it. And I think the evidence shows that it is a benefit, especially in trauma patients.
So my take on it is I'm profoundly ambivalent about how you achieve the objective. The objective is the blood pressure needs to be up. Without your blood pressure up, your cerebral perfusion pressure ain't there. And that's what matters. That's what is driving that increase in mortality. So in the EPIC trial, they didn't use push dose. They just used fluids. And that simple intervention lowered mortality.
Yeah.
In the moderately injured ones that we can do something about. So I'm okay. I think you should start fluids, start doing aliquots. But if that doesn't do the trick, then absolutely go for a pressor. And I think push dose epi is absolutely the one.
I think that there's an old school kind of fear of pressors in trauma patients.
Right.
And I think that's part of it, especially multiple trauma patients where there could be blood loss. This kid's isolated head injury, so the hypotension is probably more vasodilatory from the neurologic injury. So that makes some physiologic sense. But I do think that a message, and we didn't really talk about it that much in our training. In our training that we did, we talked a lot about the choice of intubate to not intubate, and frankly told our crews that there's not, you can pick whichever one you want. Yeah. But that BLS airway with a well-controlled airway is totally okay in this kid. On the other hand, if for whatever reasons you choose to take the airway, we really focused on making sure you did it in a manner that was controlled, thoughtful, and not rushed or, et cetera. But the push dose epi question, it was one that we really didn't answer. And I think getting back to our crews to sort of reinforce that hypotension is bad.
Yep.
And that we've been teaching them, as we are indeed from Jeff also, that, you resuscitate before you intubate, and that you resuscitate all the way through the DSI, RSI process, and that post intubation hypotension is real and it's bad for head injuries. And I think kind of giving better permission to use the push dose epi in trauma is probably something that is not a lot of paramedics hear.
Not a lot of physicians hear that either, by the way.
Correct.
So, just to be clear, I didn't come up with resuscitate before intubate. I wish I did. That is really cool, nice alliteration. But that's not mine. I ripped that off from somebody else. I'm pretty sure it was Weingart. So I think the key thing here is we need to avoid the bottom line. What is our objective? Avoid the damn hypotension. And what can we do to fix this? Well, we can give fluids. We can give blood if we have that, or we can give pressors. Okay, well, I'm fresh out of blood. Go ahead and start the fluids, but that takes a little time. Yeah. Even with, say, a really cool little squeezy device that gets the fluid in rapidly, cool stuff. It's still going to take a little bit. And the other stuff, Dr. Spate did this really cool thing where he not only did he look at one episode of hypotension, he developed an area under the curve. So it turns out that it's a function of how low did you go and how long did you stay there. Yeah. And it takes a while to get it up with fluids. So absolutely augment it with a little bit of push dose. Push dose, I mean, you could hit me with push dose epi. I'm going to go.
It's like a shot of Cuban coffee, man. Come on.
Come over. Yeah. It goes off. I mean, those of us who have used it, you got to do it a lot because it wears off so quickly. And that's the beauty of it. So I think we really worry about actually epinephrine in general. We worry about how much damage it's going to be. It's just not.
And Jeff, this kid's got increased pressure in the brain. They need that pressure head.
Yep.
Actually get it through. And it's funny when you look at the EPIC data and you look at their other tables that weren't published and you look at the actual blood pressures that did the best for these people, they were pushing blood pressures up to the 140s.
Yeah.
Systolic, showing that the outcomes were even better as the pressure went higher.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be waiting till the pressure is finally gets down. If you see the kid go from 120 to 100, you're starting fluids.
Yeah.
You're getting the push pressure ready, right? There's no need for kind of wait. Yeah.
And that was Dan presented that at NEMSP, and that was interesting to me. What I remember talking to him about it, I remember when he presented it, he said, we fully expected to see some sort of threshold, right? Where you're fine, and then your pressure drops below this number and it just falls off the table. And what they found was almost a linear response. The higher the blood pressure, the better the survival, up to, as you said, Peter, 140 systolic. So somebody needs to tell William Toon what a soft pressure means. He seems to be.
It looked like there were some people that were trying to look at. Caitlin was talking to him. Basically, what I meant by that was they're not super far off of what I would expect for a child of this age, but they're not exactly normal, right? But it's not making me think, holy crap, the world is ending. So they were low enough to
means we're not really sure what to do with it. We're a little concerned. We're not sure.
Put it this way.
Easy, right?
Put it this way, Jeff Jarvis will not have a soft blood pressure on the evening of November 3rd. And it may improve or not on November 4th when he wakes up to the news.
That's number 6.
I will have lots of drinks on the evening.
Exactly. My blood pressure is going to be pretty soft from vasodilation.
By the way, so we're not going to really probably know, right? Because there's a lot of mail-ins.
We're not going to know. No, we're not going to until December.
Yeah. Hopefully, by the time my GCS gets above 14 again, we will. So, Peter, Tim Watkins had a question for you there. So he's asking about kids and do they develop the same cerebral pressures in head injuries as adults? In other words, I think he's asking, are they as sensitive to ICP, more sensitive, or less sensitive?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that once your skull is hardened, and then I think that the answer is 100% yes. I think I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where you have a kid who is 3, 4, 5, who won't tolerate that pressure. If you have a child who's younger and their skull is still malleable, right? They still have the fontanelles open and so forth. Those kids are less sensitive to the pressure. But yes, once your sutures start to fuse and your skull is hard, it's that same formula. You have brain, you have blood, and there's nothing else much there. So the answer is yes, they are ice sensitive.
Once they lose their pop-off valve, huh?
That's right. The only place to go is down, and that's your brain stem.
Bad. We don't like down. Down takes some important things with it.
Yeah.
We have set a record for a Flavor Jet Live, just so you guys know.
Yeah.
Duration.
We're 2 hours and 20 minutes into this.
Holy shit, 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Extended out a little bit by asking about TXA for TBI in pediatrics, but that is so far in advance of the evidentiary skis here.
Although I will say that we've been using TXA in pediatric surgery for a whole long time at much higher doses than what has been reported as far as 1 gram or 2 grams. If you look at the dosages in kids, man, it's just sky high without any concern. Those kids who have open heart surgery and so forth. So, I am a bigger fan of heavier doses, but I'm not sure. I still don't have TXA in any of my systems, but because I still, I guess I'm just not there yet with what the evidence is showing me.
So this is adult stuff anyway. I think the evidence is okay for for hemorrhagic shock. I don't think it's there for isolated TBI, but my buddies in Tehran, they nailed it, and they told you why you need to have it. Now, it's Florida. You're taking you hit 65 as a New Yorker. You got to move to Florida.
Oh, yeah. It's God's waiting room. That's right.
Absolutely. And you absolutely have Plavix in your water supply, right?
Oh, my God, yes.
By the time you hit 70, if you haven't been in the ER for a nosebleed, you need to carry TXA just for nosebleeds.
100%. And we actually do use it in kids for that, too. So
there you go.
Well, there are a number of questions that we didn't even get to. So we're just going to have a happy hour 3.
Damn it.
So
how many people can we take here?
We can turn this into a podcast, like 3 hour podcast.
We could probably make it 1 hour podcast. Yeah, probably. We'll figure out something.
So I'll tell you, Mike, the first Lighthouse was 15 hours long on airway management and cardiac arrest.
It was pretty long.
They've been so short. Maybe you should just put this out. Somebody decided that we should do the podcast as video, and it turns out that takes a little longer to produce.
Yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? All right.
What's going to produce?
Yeah, well, like this, I don't even cut anything out of this. So I just put it out. Yeah. Easy. Anyway, but there was a couple of questions that we didn't get to. One was on triage, salt, ramp, some UC air care thing or something I ain't never heard of. So there's some questions on that. We can get. I don't even want to answer it. Don't even talk about it. We're just going to move on. I'm just saying we didn't get to it.
My answer is short. Beats me.
But I know, Peter, you've got some opinions on triage as having had to do triage, unfortunately, in real life on an MCI, and just a bunch of other stuff. So why don't you say that we let a few weeks go by? Maybe we can just get it all back together again. We can get 2 more people on here. Should we get Remley on?
I think maybe Remley and Dr. Vitellani.
Oh. Well, I'm down with that.
A little too much Texas for me.
But look at it this way: you get 2 brown people. Even Rimley's pretty, melon lacking, so we'd throw in some extra color.
All right, I'm going to get us out of here on behalf of Dr. Peter Antevy, Dr. Ritu Sahni, and Dr. Jeff Jarvis. Mike Verkes, you've been watching and interacting very well with tonight, and I'm proud of all of you. Thank you for that. You've been watching a great Flight Bridget live broadcast. We'll do it again. We'll get this thing edited, and I'll throw it on YouTube. You can watch it for later on. And with that, you guys all have a great night. Thanks so much.
Good night. Cheers, everybody.
Guys.
Good night.